forget. When we start in a minute, we're going to start in Parakuf Hey, number 25. And we're going to go to Pasuk Yud. Let's go to Yud, really Yud, number 10. Let me also turn the air on. I'm so not prepared. I'm going to prepare for the stuff I'm doing. Go back. Okay. Let me also make sure I have the PowerPoint up here ready, the right one. Tonight's Navi, not Kuzari. So close this. I can't because I have to. Okay. Now, what we saw last week was the idea that we are at the end, not just the book, but at the historical event of the worst day in just one of the two worst days of Jewish history, of the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. Danny had asked a question last week, which I'm going to answer now, not really answer, just address for a moment. And if he comes on afterwards, I'll just remind everybody. He said, it says in the pasuk that we left off, what we did last was pasuk tet, number 9. It says, Vayisrofet Beit Hashem, Beit HaMelech, so the Beit HaMikdash was burned, the king's house was burned, that Kol Beit Yerushalayim, and all the houses of Jerusalem, at Kol Beit Gadol, and all the big house, and I'll explain that again in a minute. Saraf Beish was burnt in fire. And his question was, well, what else would it be burned in? So, it's stuck in the back of my head that it's a question, but it was not a question, because I did a little background check and I just did a simple search in Tanakh, and dozens and dozens and dozens of times it says Saraf Be'esh. It's a phrase that is used over and over. And therefore, in this case, it's not out of the ordinary. What was out of the ordinary was mentioning twice the burning, the verb to burn, the same sentence, the same pasuk. Danny had suggested something, but what I do want to mention is this idea, the Beit Gadol, which is where we left off. We said that Rashi says that, what does it mean, the big house? It sounds like a jail. But what is the big house? So according to Rashi, it was the Batei Knesset. It was shuls that were called that because the word, not just Gadol, Megadlim Bahem Torah, that they raised Torah scholars. They raised people to learn Torah and to daven. And also he mentions an alternative idea, which is Batei Sarim, which is like the house of the upper class, let's say. The vast majority, with the exception of Rashi, seem to say is nothing to do with shuls, but rather has to do with the upper society, the bigger houses. So like the rich people got it.
It's singular.
Sorry?
It's
yes, it's singular. It is.
If there's any one of them.
Right. It's very good. Someone mentioned something like that. I forgot the reason, but someone did catch that. One of the commentaries, but I don't remember what the point was. Now, so that led to the question of what was the function, if any, of Beit Knesset at that time period of history. So I sent this query to my dear friend Barnea. He hasn't gotten back to me. He's been, thank God, very, very busy because it's with tours internal, especially right now. But I did do my own little research, and some of the possibilities are that there were maybe at this time period, there's evidently 3 opinions as to when Batei Knesset really started. One is around this time. One is the time of the Galut, Bavel. This is just after destruction. And one is upon the return. And yes, we have, there are ancient artifacts of old shuls as well, and they're not necessarily the same style that we might be used to of today. Like I mentioned, that they don't have, most of those that I'd seen up north, there was no recognizable women's section. There was no Ezrat Nashim. So some of the possibilities, if there were Batei Knesset at this time, yeah, you're going to say, Arnold?
Yeah, find something.
Okay, Arnold's looking for something right now. We'll share that. Oh, good, that he wrote. Excellent. That they could have been used for public Torah reading. It could have been used. There was no necessarily,
houses.
Sorry?
No study.
There was study houses. That's also what Rashi says. Exactly. That the word kanes means just a gathering place. It could have been that people who were tmeim, who were unavailable to go to the Beit HaMikdash because they're ritually impure. It could have been just a communal gathering place, as Arnold's saying right now too. Multiple possibilities. But again, it seems to be Rashi is one of the only commentaries that seems to indicate that these were shuls in this particular situation, in this pasuk. And everyone else seems to refer to it as Batei Savim, the houses of those who were on the higher station, people who were of a higher class citizen. So when you find this, let me know. I'll have you share that with the class. Okay. So we're going to continue in pasuk Yud, number 10. In addition to, and we did this last week also. I just want to kind of bring it into so we have it as a run-in. Yud ve'et chomat Yerushalayim saviv. Hello, Aryeh. Ve'et chomat Yerushalayim saviv, and the wall around Yerushalayim. Natzu kol chel kasdim. Asherav tabachim. Let's see. Hold on 1 second. Let's see. Arnold is this just in. When was the synagogue invented? So what? Okay, right. So your first sentence is basically what I just said, that it's hard to know for sure when the institution of the synagogue first came into existence, but most scholars believe it happened at some point during the first half of the Second Temple period. Right. That's what I found as well. What I'd like to do, Arnold has an article he wrote about this, is just ask if you could send a link to on the Navi group. This way we get a chance to read it. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Where was I? Okay, so in middle pasuk Yud, that it says in this particular pasuk that natetzu kol chel kasdim, that all the soldiers took part in this particular event. It was this massive onslaught into Yerushalayim. It wasn't just they were looking to, if you've ever watched any police shows, you'll know that they distinguish between a murder victim that's been stabbed 1 or 2 times and a murder victim that's been stabbed many, many, many times. They call it a crime of passion, vengeance, and all. The more heinous, the more horrific the act was, it shows the more passion behind it. And there was the massive amount of every soldier that came, that was sent by the king of Babel, was participating in this particular attack on Yerushalayim. Now, this is where we left off. We're going to go to Yud Aleph. V'et yeter ha'am hanisharim. Actually, just a minute. I want to, here, a second. Let me put on, I forgot I had this now. Screen share. How come I don't see? This is interesting. Show all windows. Hold on 1 second. I have to close a couple things here so that I can share properly. Close window. This, close, no. This is open. Okay, good. Sorry, it's a little, I'm gonna have to fire my entire staff here, I think. Okay, let's try again. It's not showing me this. What? That's very strange. Let me close this. Let me try this one more time. This better work. This is just the map. Unless, hold on 1 second. What I am going to do is put the video, the recording on pause for a minute, so that in 2 or 3 minutes. Hi. Okay, now, as I said, we're going to go to a screen share and look at on one slide. On this slide, I know you can't really see it where you're sitting right now, but I'll read it out loud. Okay. Yeah, you could go into Zoom. That's true. It says Asher Rava Tabachim. It said in that last pasuk, in pasuk Yud, that Kol Chel Kasdim Asher Rav Tabachim. B'Shem Zeh Ramaz Yirmiyahu Lema Sha'asa Adam Zeh. This name, and this is more than once. We saw this last week already. That this man, Nebuzaradan, who I told you should be on the same level in your minds as Hitler, Yamach Shemo, was known as the Rav Tabachim, and it said Tabach is a butcher, because that's exactly what he did. It says that by using this name again, Yirmiyahu is telling us the character of this individual. Bigmara ne'emar Nebuzaradan arach hereg Rav Birushalayim. The Gemara tells us that Nebuzaradan arranged a tremendous amount of murder in Yerushalayim, ad shehu atzmo nechrad mima she'asa, to the point where he himself was shocked by the amount of death that he brought about. Okay, now I'm going to keep this slide here on the screen because we're going to look at this in just a second again with the next pasuk. Take a look now, please, at pasuk Yud Aleph number 11. Ve'et yeter ha'am hanisharim ba'ir, the rest of the people that remained in the city, ve'et hanoflim asher naflu al melech Bavel, ve'et yeter hamon, hegla Nebuzaradan rav tabachim. So Nebuzaradan sends all these people. We're going to see what all this means in a minute when we look at the slide. All these people are sent away. What's going to happen to them? We'll see. Take a look at the slide. Actually, let me see if I move this back. No, that's not going to help you, Arnold, too much. Okay, so let's move. You know what? Do me a favor. See, I'm not yet used to all this back, being back here in business. Remove this down there, please. Get out of here. Okay, if you want to move down here. Okay. It's a good thing this isn't my first class, because like I don't think anyone would ever come back. I was there in Chicago as a rabbi for 10 years. In my 9th year there, I did something on Shabbat that I needed basically have big slides. Obviously, the Shabbat I couldn't, so I got a hold of a not a whiteboard but an easel, and I had a giant pad of paper. And before Shabbat, I wrote down certain words and letters, and I put it up. And in the middle, it fell down. I put it up, and my notes fell off my. It was an absolute mess. I said, it's a good thing it wasn't my Prabha Shabbat to check to see if I would be getting the job altogether, because I would have been fired before I was hired. That's how I feel like tonight. So like it's amateur hour. Okay. Anyways, so I'm going to read it out of my book here. So you guys, okay, because I don't know if I can see it too well. Okay. So it says, V'yeter ha'am, the rest of the people. Lo nizkar kama hayu. First of all, it doesn't tell us how many people we're talking about. Kamur rabim hayu hametim mikol minei puraniot. There obviously were many who died because of all kinds of problems. And when we get to Sefer Echa, we're going to see this a little bit more depth about the delineation of what physically happened to the Jews. Then it says Hanisharim Ba'ir. Shalometu lo nehergu. So those who were left over who had not died, nor were they killed. And what does it mean? Hanoflim asher naflu. Those people who surrendered doesn't mean usually nafel means they fell in battle. But you're not sending someone who's dead into galut, into the exile. They sent them. These are people who had already surrendered. At kol ele hechzik Nebuzaradan b'machaneh bavlim ad nefilat ha'ir lo nizkar kam hayu. What did he do with these people? He put them into, let's say, prisons, into camps that were being kind of held there while the city was being sacked. From this, we see that there were many people who were sent into Galutam over here that were not even mentioned at all in the book of Melachim. What's Yeter Hamon, the rest of the masses? Hainu Mishar Arei Yehuda, from other areas in the area of Judah. Hegla, he sent them into Galut. Rav Tabachim, Kol Ish Chashuv Hem Megalim Kedei Lavtiach Lahem Et Ne'emanut Ha'am. Okay, I'm not going to go into that one. So now I'm going to leave this. I'm not going to leave that on the screen. We're going to come back to that. Okay, let's take a look now. So again, this happens in stages. First thing, they breach the wall. Then they come in and they burn the city. They take people that are there and they send them into Galut. There will be people left in Yerushalayim. We're going to see that also. Pasuk Yud Bet. Number 12. Umidalat haaretz, and the people, the poor of the land, hishir rav tabachim lechormim ulegovim. He left them behind in order to be to work the fields, to work the vineyards. Why would he do that? Why would he leave what was he doing here? He's leaving the poor and for a purpose. So he did not, when it came to the land, evidently, he did not have a scorched earth policy. It did not look like he was there, that he was trying to just wipe out that which was there completely. He wanted there to be some form of agriculture. There were still people living there, and he's going to attempt to foster that there'll be people continuing to live there. But why specifically the poor? Why does he the lower class citizen, the poor people, Dala generally means very poor. So right, that's exactly the answer. For those you didn't hear, Arnold just said they won't be rebelling. Was it Groucho Marx said the peasants are revolting. Yeah, they certainly are. Right. Anyway, so his point here was by keeping these people, he was going to accomplish two things. First, he was going to have people who would till the soil, plant, and do the vineyards and work the fields. And on the other hand, he also knew he was kind of ensuring himself that there was not going to be a rebellion that was going to be coming from the poor people. Next, Pasuk Yud Gimel. I'm going to read the next 1, 2, 3 psukim, give a general description of what's going on, and then we're going to look at a couple things. The pillars of copper in the Beit HaMikdash, the wheels that were on the sink, not the sink, the basin that were made out of copper, were destroyed, were broken apart by the kasdim. And they took the copper, they took it to Bavel. And we'll come back to these psukim. They also took all the utensils. These are the various utensils with the fire pans, etc., that were used in the Beit HaMikdash. And they took those to Babel. And all the other utensils that were made of gold, those that were made of silver, and that expression, zahav, kesef, is a way of saying those that were made of this, those were taken. In Hebrew, when you want to emphasize something, you say the word twice. For example, who. It means that's him, that's the guy. Or this is it. So the sense this is doing over here in this pasuk. Hamudim, what else did they take? Hamudim shnaim, 2 pillars. Hayam ha'echad v'hamechonot asher asa Shlomo leBeit Hashem. This list of all these items comes at the end of this pasuk. He tells us that they tried even to weigh how much this material was, and it was such a vast amount they couldn't even weigh. Okay, now before we look at any of the Mefarshim, any of the commentaries on here, I want to do 2 things. First, keep in mind we're talking about first Beit HaMikdash. This is very important. Many people mistakenly believe or think that the first Beit HaMikdash and the second Beit HaMikdash destructions are mentioned in Tanakh. They are not. Only the first Beit HaMikdash, and what we will learn down the road in Shivat Zion, when the Jews return from Galut, is the rebuilding of the second Beit HaMikdash, but the destruction is, I turn silent, but the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash does not appear in Tanakh. It's left to historians such as Josephus and others to give us some background, and then of course we have other works. However, there was a similar modus operandi. Not only did it happen on the same date, we talked about last week, why is it that the Navi records the 7th of Av, then the 10th of Av in Yirmiyahu? We reconciled that. The Gemara tells us that the destruction of the burning began late on the 9th of Tisha B'Av, and the majority was on the 10th of Av. We talked about the halachic ramifications last week of that piece of information. But here it's telling us in a matter of 4 psukim. There's one I didn't read yet about the merchandise, all the stuff, all the materials that were taken from the Beit HaMikdash and taken to Bavel. So I want to take a look at 2 things. One is this probably one of the more famous pieces of art. It's not art. I think it's called a bas-relief, B-A-S, on the Arch of Titus. If you're not familiar with it, you should be familiar with it. This depicts the Romans taking away the spoils of the Beit HaMikdash. Whether it was imagination, whether it was real, is immaterial at the moment. Here's the menorah for the Beit HaMikdash and some of the utensils over here. And this is the Arch of Titus. It still exists in Rome. It was said that Jews should never walk under the under there until I think it was the when Israel won the War of Independence, and then they danced there. I've seen pictures of people who've come from Israel standing in front of it, making, let's just say, very unfriendly gestures at this at the Arch of Titus.
That used to be even more impressive because it used to be in color.
It used to be in color until it was worn away over the centuries. Yeah, correct. I've never seen it in person. Have you seen it in person? Anybody here seen it in person? You've seen it. So it's when you realize what you're looking at, let's assume for a moment this is someone who actually witnessed it and made this. Okay, we don't know for sure that, but let's just assume you're talking about what would it be the equivalent of the Zapruder film, if you know what I'm talking about. John F. Kennedy was murdered November of 1963, and Abe Zapruder, who had an 8mm, I believe, camera, who was the only one who caught the majority of the assassination of JFK. It is the film that has been sliced and diced for many, many years. Movies have been made of it, but he was actually interviewed. The man who made the film, Abe Zapruder, was interviewed on TV only a couple hours after the murder of JFK. But it is, when you see it, when he comes out of what's called the triple underpass in the Stemmons Freeway, don't ask why I know so much about it. It happens to be a point of interest for me. Then you see very clearly what happened in the movie. You can't say it's video because it wasn't video, but it is an actual recording of this turning point in American history. Here, Lahavdil, this is a turning point in Jewish history. This is the second, after the destruction of the second, not the first, Beit HaMikdash, and the Romans are taking all of these utensils out of the Beit HaMikdash. This is a repeat of what happened only many years before. Now, the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash is 586 BCE. Second Beit HaMikdash is 70 of the Common Era. So 586 plus 70, you do the math. So about 650 years, a little bit more. About 650 years between the two destructions. But it's the same methodology. Now, we've talked about this, that when you take a look at, for example, the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, and you take a look at things that says in Navi that our enemies did to us, or you look in the Middle Ages of what things were done to the Jewish people in various pogroms, or the Chmielnicki massacres, or it was the Godfrey de Bouillon who began the whole Crusades in 1095/1096. All these things are just repeats of themselves, different, same place, same stuff, different place. And it is sick. It's sad to see the consistency with which our enemies come against us. This relief, this depiction could have easily been these psukim. It's not, like I said, because it's happening over 600 years later. But this could have been the same depiction back in 586 BCE. Now, what I do want to show you is the following. I have to unshare and start sharing with sound. Share. I'm going to share with you. Here? Yeah, okay. Move this over. Okay. I mentioned to you last week that Migalim is a educational division of Ir David, and they make videos in Hebrew and in English that depict various time periods in Jewish history. This one is, as you can see on the top, the Arch of Titus and the Temple Menorah from Jerusalem to Rome and back. It's about 7 minutes long, and it's worthwhile watching for two reasons. Number one, it helps us understand the time period we're in right now, which is the week before Tisha B'Av. Number two, we're going to see a depiction that's very similar to what happens here in these psukim. And at the end of this particular video, we're going to kind of close the circle historical. We'll take a look at this.
Titus's conquest of Jerusalem in the year 70 CE was considered a tremendous achievement by the Romans. His suppression of the long rebellion in Judea proved once again that the Roman Empire was the strongest power in the world. On the Temple Mount, the Roman army cheers its venerated commander Titus. While Jerusalem goes up in flames, Titus quickly prepares the exhibits for the victory parade in Rome. For this purpose, he gathers many valuable objects and prisoners of war.
Okay, I'm going to stop here for 1 second. I'm going to point out that I didn't say it while we're learning this. But what was the purpose of taking all this back to Bavel, or in this case, Rome? It's not just to have the physical material, which would be important too, but this is a show of conquest. This is a show of power, a victory parade, which we'll see.
Except they broke it all down.
Sorry, they some of it. The utensils they kept. That's why it says they kept the mizarkot and all that. That's why it says it differently. When things that were layered in something, they ripped the layering off, the what's it called? Plating. Thank you very much. But things that were actual utensils, they kept them whole. And we're actually going to see it in the video also from this.
But the celebrations begin even before they arrive. Here in Caesarea, in Beirut, in Agrippa's kingdom in the north, they are drunken parties. To entertain the crowds, thousands of Jews are thrown to beasts of prey and into combat against bloodthirsty gladiators. When Titus finally anchors in Rome, the Romans flock to greet him. The most magnificent victory parade in the empire's history gets underway. The parade begins with a colossal display of strength by the Roman legions. The Roman gods lead the way, followed by a vast stream of spoils of war, silver and gold vessels, ivory, works of art, and animals. Titus brought so much silver and gold in spoils from Jerusalem that their price dropped throughout the empire. Vespasian would use some of the captured treasure to build the Colosseum, the most magnificent Roman amphitheater in the world. The crowd is amazed at the vast amount of plunder, but the climax arrives when the holy temple vessels are paraded before the masses, including the golden menorah. Behind them, like a prisoner of war, is carried the representative of the Jewish faith, a single Torah scroll from Jerusalem. In the rear are led the prisoners of war themselves. Defeated and disgraced, the POWs from Israel march through the streets of Rome. Their war wounds are well concealed by the embroidered silk garments they're dressed in by the Romans. But nothing can take away the searing pain they bear in their hearts. The crowds cheer Vespasian and Titus as the victory parade makes its way here to the Capitoline Hill. Here, at the temple of Jupiter Capitolinus, the parade stops and a hush falls on the crowd. Simon Bar Giora, Jewish commander and spirited leader of the rebellion, is pulled from among the ranks of rebels. With a rope around his neck, he is dragged brutally through the streets of Rome as the wild throng beats him from all sides. The Romans immortalized the conquest of Jerusalem and this parade with a glorious monument situated in the heart of the empire's capital. Exactly where the victory parade passed, Domitian, Titus's brother, built a 15-meter-high gate in honor of the great victory. Depicted in the relief on the arch are Roman soldiers crowned with laurel wreaths as they carry the temple vessels, the silver trumpets, the showbread table, and in the center, the temple menorah, painted gold. No wonder the Jews of Rome despised the Arch of Titus. The monument, built 2,000 years ago, served as a painful reminder of the total destruction of Jerusalem and the humiliation of the Jewish people. The sight of the arch seared the Jews' hearts like fire, and for centuries they refused to pass beneath it. Until 1947.
Of the Dutch Committee for Palestine was adopted by 33 votes, 13 against, 10 abstentions.
The The day after November 29th, the day the UN Assembly declared the establishment of a Jewish state in the land of Israel, the Rabbi of Rome, Rabbi David Prato, convened the Jewish community before the detested arch. The rabbi wished to mark the historic occasion before his community, who gathered by the arch, along with representatives of the youth movements and refugees from the Holocaust, on their way to Israel. Moved to tears, the elderly rabbi, who had given thousands of speeches, couldn't utter a word. The rabbi cried out, "Who sustained us and kept us and brought us to this day." Then, instead of speaking, he started to march, followed by the whole community, straight into the Victory Arch. For the first time in 2,000 years, Jews passed through the Arch of Titus again. We walked through in the opposite direction, not like our ancestors 2,000 years ago, who passed through as slaves, but as a free people, as if we were walking back to freedom. We felt on top of the world.
Obviously, a video can't portray the devastation that was wrought in Yerushalayim, the feelings the Jews had when they were marched in the street, whether it was Bavel or Rome centuries later, but to give you some feeling of what they may have witnessed, gone through, and the horrific times that was. What I want to do is take a look at a couple of slides. Okay. It says et hasirot. Okay, this is a list. Remember in pasuk Yud Daled, it listed a few themes. So I'm just going to read what he says here on this. Abadlin kvar hayu ashirim me'od b'ota sha'a mishalal kol hagoyim. You know, I've mentioned this before, and I'm sure I'll say this again, that we tend to think of Jewish history as there were the Jews and the world revolved around us. But that's not the case. We're a teeny speck, right? We still are a tiny speck, even though we are in the world stage at all times, and the entire world's ills are obviously our fault. Just ask almost anybody in the world. Whether, you know, when we were in Mitzrayim, there were other nations that were enslaved also, and there were other things going on in the world. When Yitzchak Avinu was alive, there was approximately the same time as Hammurabi, as you're familiar with the Code of Hammurabi. So it doesn't happen in a vacuum. So when the Babylonians are crushing and defeating Yerushalayim, it is our national historic tragedy, but it's also just another notch in the belt of Sancheriv and his henchmen. So they were already very wealthy because of all the spoils of war they had from other nations. Nevertheless, nechshavu me'od be'enehem klei hanechoshet shel Beit HaMikdash. They still found it extremely important that they gave a level of importance to the copper for the Beit HaMikdash, but it goes further than that. It says, Asher yishartu bam. If you take a look again, Pasuk Yud Daled, it lists all these things, the fire pans and everything, and the spoons, Asher yishartu bam, that they served with them in the Beit HaMikdash, lakachu, they took. Why does Yirmiyahu add those words, Asher yishartu bam? We know that they were used in the Beit HaMikdash. So he tells us here, Ze tam chashivutan. It wasn't so much the value of the metal. That wasn't the most important thing. But the fact that they were used in the Beit HaMikdash, those objects were used to worship God, to serve Hashem in the Beit HaMikdash. Sheshmo gadol haya gam ben habavlim. The temple, the Beit HaMikdash, the materials that were used, everything was very well known already, even among the Babylonians. ואולי כתב ירמיהו זאת כתם, למה שכלים אלו זכו להישאר. Maybe the reason that Yirmiyahu is telling us that these utensils had the merit to remain, ולא הפכו לגרוטאות כעמודים ומכונות, and they weren't like ground up into scrap. מפני שבכלים אלו שרתו לפני השם. It was these very utensils that they were used in the Beit HaMikdash. היו תחת השגחה אלוקית מיוחדת. They were under some very special watchful eye, so to speak, of Hashem. Then it tells us in Pasuk Tedvav, a list of more of these things. Machtot, mizrakot, asher zahav, zahav, etc. It says like this. Nizkeru machtot lechud, mitnei shebehem iktiru et haketoret. It specifically mentions the fire pans, because the fire pans with which they used to make the ketoret. Et hamizrakot, mitnei shebehem hikrivu et adam al hamizbeach. And the mizrakot were mentioned because they used those utensils to sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach. Asher zahav zahav ish zeh shetaraf v'lo chamal. This person, meaning Nebuzaradan, who had no mercy, saraf, he burned, v'lo yivchin, and he didn't distinguish. Yodea lahavdil udayek yafeh b'chol kli hamatechet hayekara. V'shema gam zeh nechtav ach k'dei leha'id al hashgachat Hashem al klei beit hamikdasho shegam hamacharivim nahagu b'hem kavod. He said, not only did they say that we're going to take these things because they were used in the temple by the Jews, but also they gave it a level of certain respect as well. And this is Hashem's watchful eye over these particular utensils that were used to serve him in the Beit HaMikdash. And Hashem didn't want those to be ground into scrap. And who took them? Lakach rav hatabachim. Hakol nizkaf l'rav hatabachim hazeh, shavchu, shekafi hanir'eh, asa dvarim rabim gam al dat atzmo. Okay, fine, whatever that, I'm gonna skip the end. Next. Okay, this is a map we're gonna take a look at in a minute. I'm gonna make it larger so you can actually see it, but I'm just gonna leave it on the screen, but we're not gonna get to it for another minute or two, or maybe three, okay? Take a look, please, at Pasuk Yud Zayin, number 17. Let's see something. Okay. Shmone esrei ama komata amud echad. I mentioned in the prior pasuk amudim, 2 pillars. One was 18 amot high, amud echad. The koteret now, and amma is approximately in inches, 18 inches. So 18 times 18, okay, that's 180 plus. Okay, that's good. It's a lot. it's after 6 p.m. I don't do math. What?
Somewhere on 400. It's 460, 470. Or 360, 370.
Okay, good. So that they were very, very tall. Now I don't remember, I didn't look into it, but I believe, unless it says it down here, these were the Yachin and Boaz. If you remember way back when, about 3 years ago, more, when we learned Perek Zayin in Malachim Aleph, it was talking about the architecture of the Beit HaMikdash and what was built and how it was made. And it's going to actually make reference in this pasuk to some of those things. One of those things that was made were 2 massive pillars at the entrance to the Beit HaMikdash, and they're given names, Yachin and Boaz. I believe this is what they're referring to here. I have to look further, but I didn't check it for sure, so I can't say 100%. So there's one, the Koteret Alad Nechoshet, the Komata Koteret Shalosh Amot, Usvacha V'rimonim ala Koteret Saviv Kol HaNechoshet, if you remember, we saw these, there were massive pillars. On the top, they were called, I don't know how you pronounce it. I think we call them capiters, but like these, the tops of them were rounded with mesh around them. It looked like mesh. It was all metalwork, but mesh, very fancy. And he's describing what I believe is the Yachin and Boaz, unless he says it here somewhere. I don't see it real quick. I'll have to double check. And those were carted away as well. And what does he do now? Vayikach Rav Tabachim, Pasuk Yud Chet. Vayikach Rav Tabachim et Sraya Kohen Harosh, bet Tzfanyahu Kohen Mishneh, bet Shloshet Shomrei Hasaf. He's going to, in the next couple of psukim, gather together various individuals, and we'll see why he's doing this in a minute. But right now, let's just see who these people are. he takes what would be considered the Kohen HaGadol, or the Kohen who was in charge. We've seen this idea before. The Kohen in charge of all the mishmarot, all the shifts, and the second in command, Kohen, whose name was Tzfanyahu, and 3 of the watchmen who were outside the area of the Beit HaMikdash. He takes them, and I'm going to read Yudchet, Yudtet, and Kaf and Kaf Aleph as a package. I'm going to go back to them. Umina'ir, and from the city, Lakach Saris Achad, Ashu Pakid al Anshe Milchama. He took one eunuch who was in charge of overseeing the people who would go to battle. Achamisha Nashim Meroe Pnei HaMelech, and 5 people who would see the face of the king, meaning they were very close to the king. Asher Nitzeu Va'ir, Bet HaSofer Sara Tzava, and the recorder, which we're going to see when we take a look at Rashi. I'm just going to translate that now as the recorder of the army. Hamatzbiat HaMa'aretz, who would be the person to send people to the war or to battle. V'shishim ish miyam ha'aretz, and 60 commoners. Hanin Sa'im Ba'ir, who was still found in the city. Remember, this is all happening during this time period of destruction of the city. He's destroying the city, he's killing people, he's burning down the Beit HaMikdash, he's burning down houses, and pockets of people he's gathering together, and specifically what appears to be the Kohen Gadol and the second in command, and people who are very close to the Beit HaMikdash. We're going to see why in a minute, those. And what does he do? Kaf. Vayikach otam Nebuzaradan Rav Tabachim. And Nebuzaradan, again, he keeps calling him the Rav Tabachim, the head butcher. Vayolech otam al Melech Bavel Rivlata. And he takes them to the king of Bavel, who was in Rivla. And we're going to look at that map in a minute. Don't look yet. And what does he do there? Vayach otam Melech Bavel, vayimitem berivla be'eretz Chamat. He kills them all. Vayigel Yehuda me'al admato, and Judah was banished, was exiled from its land. Now, for a couple of things we have to take a look at, we have to see this word Vayigel. We're going to come back to that. Where is Rivla, and why specifically these people, in particular the Kohanim, are the ones that are taken? Okay. So first, let's take a look at where we're talking about. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can actually see better. Okay. Here we are. Here's Yerushalayim. Here's, well, you can't see it. My Leadum is right over here. This is Israel. Here's Lebanon. As you move up into Lebanon, into Upper Syria. Now, this name Palmyra was in the news a few years ago, many, many times, when ISIS, Yamach Shemam, were destroying ancient relics in the city of Palmyra to wipe out the history that was there. So you're talking about very close to that city. Here's Hamat, which is now over here, but it's nothing to do with Hamas. And this is the city of Rivla that we're talking about. This is where the king, Nebuchadnezzar of Bavel, which is over here, was waiting over here. We've already seen that he was in Rivla in earlier psukim. I guess it's from here that he's sending all his henchmen down, from the north, down here. Now, why is it important to see where he is? So if you were paying attention to the Haftarah, not this week, but last week, the words, Mitzafon tipatach ha'ara'a. The evil will come from the north. That was Yirmiyahu's prophecy. And this is exactly what happened. The prophecy of Yirmiyahu is that from the north, they're going to come into. They didn't come and surround them. We've seen other situations where they were attacked from different angles, different sides, surrounded. In this case, the final hammer blow, so to speak, is this direction from here. And the Jews then, this is the purpose of this particular map, which from the Dat Mikra book, is to show the path the Jews took on their way to Bavel when they were taken into Galut. They start in Yerushalayim, the greater Jerusalem area. They're taken up. This is where these people we just read about in the Psukim are slaughtered, and the rest of the Jews who had already been taken or will be taken, here's Aleppo, Syria. They make a right-hand turn, and you have arrived at your destination. Your destination's on your right. The truth is that when they were in Bavel, they actually had not such a bad life. It was very different than when the Romans took them. We're not going to deal with that at all tonight. But their life was not so terrible in Bavel. It was not as good as Teaneck, God forbid. Yeah, the 5 towns. I mean, how could it be, right? Tov. Now, why these individuals? Why do you think he would specifically target what looks to be the Kohen Gadol? Well, it should hopefully be somewhat obvious, because the whole point here was the destruction of Beit HaMikdash, the emasculation, so to speak, of Am Yisrael, the destruction and everything. So you take the figureheads who represented the Beit HaMikdash, the ones who worked in it, and you get rid of them, and you're making another strong point. All these others are showing the different strata, the different layers of society. You're talking about people who were close to the king, and these hangers-on that were just part, the Amharites, people, the commoners in the streets. He took all of them to make the statement that I'm going to get you from every single level of society, and I'm going to break you completely. Now, if you take a look, if you have Rashi in your book, just take a look at one of the people he takes is called, in Pasuk Yud Tet, the Sofer Tzara. What is that? Pasuk Yud Tet, Sofer Tzara, sorry. Shaya Yodea Minyan Kol Ir Va'ir. He was the individual who was in charge of knowing how many soldiers, not just people, but specifically soldiers, were in each city. Kama anashim motziyah letzava, and how many he could send to war, to battle. So that person was also taken. So you take the people that are in charge of the Beit HaMikdash. You take the person who's in charge of sending people to war. And you do this, and you take, like I say, the average guy in the street, and you're making a very powerful statement. But it uses, and it takes them to Rivla, kills them all there. But it makes a very strange grammatical statement. If you look at the end of Pasuk Kaf Aleph, it says, Vayigel Yehuda me'al admato. It should say Vayagel. And he caused them, or he made them go into Galut. So what's this Vayigel? So take a look. Oh, I gotta make it smaller now. Okay, it's poor quality of. I would, if I were you, I'd fire me. Really.
Not getting off that easy.
I'm not getting off that easy. It's only been 11 years we're doing this. So. I think maybe after 11, 12 more years, we'll see. Vayigal Yehuda.
We can't
What's
afford
that?
it. We can't afford to fire. You've got tenure. It'll cost us a fortune.
That's so much. Vayigal Yehuda. Ne'emar Vayigal Bechirik. In Hebrew, whether you're aware of it or not, what you might call the dots, the tnuot, the vowels, have names. Chirik, Patach, Kamatz, Kubut, Shuruk, Chatav Patach. The single dot is called the chirik, the E sound, without a yud after it. So it says Vayigal with the chirik. Kamola El Yud Zayin Kaf Gimel Begaluta Seret Hashvatim. The same word is used in that unusual fashion when the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom are sent into Galut. Velo Vayagel or Vayegel Besegol. It doesn't say Vayegel, like it says in a different pasuk. Begalut Shomron. Remember that there were 3 stages to Galut. Shomron, just the area of the Shomron. Then all the 10 tribes in the north, and now Yehuda. Begalut Yoyachim. Ulachar Kol Mashiira. Now, after everything that happened, the Jews saw Galut Shomron. The Jews saw the Galut of the 10 tribes. Then the Jews saw 130 years approximately of ups and downs, let's just say, where things were fabulous and things were terrible. And after all this, and after someone like Menashe, they felt et atzmam nidachim v'golim min haaretz. They already felt like they had already taken themselves out of this country. V'hit ya'ashu mimena, and they gave up hope from it. Even though they still took hold of the land or held the land for so long, with all their strength, they prefer dying in the land rather than having to leave the land. So when he's saying the word Vayigal doesn't just mean that they were now being taken out into Galut, into the exile, but they also had, in a sense, exiled themselves in a sense that they've already given up hope that they're ever going to be able to see this country again in the state that they were living in before all this happened.
Dead man walking?
Like dead man walking, yes. In a sense, it's like dead man walking. I worked with a guy many, many years ago when I was in the purchasing world. and he was head of a large section of the employees. And he had a policy that if he was going to fire someone, he didn't wait to fire them and say, you have 2 more weeks, says, you're gone today for various reasons. But before he would fire him that day, he would come up to a couple of us and say, dead man walking, because the guy didn't exist anymore, because it was a zero. So,
Wow.
yeah, wow,
Okay.
very tough. It was actually a very good boss. I worked for him for a little bit.
Oh, sure.
Until I got canned. No. Okay. Tov. Now, if you take a look at Pasuk Kaf Bet, this is a last gasp for Am Yisrael. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read this Pasuk, only this Pasuk, give you a little bit of a summary of what's coming up. It's only a few Pasukim, but it cannot be done like in a couple minutes. It has to be done properly and slowly. V'ha'am hanishar be'eretz Yehuda, asher hishir Nebuchadnezzar melech Bavel, the people that were still left. Remember, there were still people left in the land of Israel, but it's not like Nebuchadnezzar can just turn around, go back to Bavel, and then they're going to carry on their merry way. He needed to keep a foothold in this country and make sure that whoever was running it was under his thumb. Vayafked alehem et Gedaliyahu ben Achikam ben Shaphan. He appointed the last Jewish governor, the last vestige of any Jewish rule in this land from that time period until 1948, May of 1948. It's almost 2,000 years more. What am I talking about? Even more, because even though we had time in the second Beit HaMikdash time, that's its own story. He is this last gasp of a Jewish governor to watch over the people and to also make sure that they stay in line and don't rebel. Now, you can close your book. I was going to tell you that this is one of the lesser known and one of the more sad events that takes place in all of Tanakh. We have seen that there are all these stages that have taken place since we started talking about many Rakim ago about Galut, about the exile of the Jews. Most people, if they don't learn Tanakh, or at least Sefer Melachim, are under the impression, as I was for many, many years, because I didn't learn Tanakh when I was growing up properly. You know, it was an afterthought, as it is in most yeshiva day schools, unfortunately, that there was a time period when there were Jews in Israel, and then along came this guy Nebuchadnezzar and got rid of everybody, and that was the end of the story. So all the Jews went at one time, and we know that it was not true. It was a period of over 130 years, and it happened in these 3 stages. What's lesser known and understood is if you ask the average Orthodox Jew on the day after Rosh Hashanah, when they're fasting for Tzom Gedalia, why are they fasting? Unfortunately, most people do not know. And it's for the following 7-8 psukim that we fast. Because what happens is that Gedaliyahu is appointed as the governor. It should be at least to maintain, from our perspective, a foothold of Jews in the country, some sense of sovereignty, even though we're under the thumb of Bavel. But it was, so as long as, Gedaliyahu keep the peace from both directions, the Jews to Bavel, Bavel to the Jews, then it would be literally Shalma Yisrael. As a result of some severe jealousy among the Jews and some misreading of certain cues from the Babylonians, Gedaliyahu is murdered. And that really is the end of the beginning of the full Galut of Am Yisrael, where we really had that last gasp, that last chance. The Sefer Melachim is going to end with 2 psukim that are radically different than the 2 psukim at the end of Sefer Divrei Hayamim. We're going to look at both of them, Bezrat Hashem, next week, not on Sunday night, because that's going to be in Tisha B'Av. Whereas you know that very often, when you read a Haftarah and Shul on Shabbat, if the last pasuk is something negative, you go back to what's called the penultimate, the pasuk before the last one, and you reread that, so you end on a high note. So Sefer Melachim ends on an implied upswing, Sefer Divrei Hayamim on a very high upswing, because it basically quotes the beginning of Sefer Ezra, which is the beginning of the return of the Jews from Bavel. So that's what's coming up, Bezrat Hashem. We'll see. I'll let you know what night, Bezrat Hashem, next week we can do this. Maybe we'll do it Wednesday night. So this way we'll do Kuzari the more. I mean, we'll see. I don't know. We'll wait and see. I don't want to shoot my mouth up too much. I already messed it up tonight. So Everyone have a good evening. For those of you who are not aware, tonight at 8:15 Marv, at 8:30 at Panation Well, there's a community meeting where there's speakers coming from a couple of organizations dealing with the issues and problems within the youth, not just our community, many communities, drugs and alcohol, making parents aware where there are trouble, how to deal with them, if there are problems. It's not an indictment of community, but it's an awareness program. I'm not involved in the program in any way, but I think it's very worthwhile for people to attend. It's in Hebrew and English. The opening statement will be Rav Aviner. There'll be a brief something from an organization, and there's going to be 2 breakout sessions, one in English and one in Hebrew. Okay.